My parents stole my 120,000 MBA fund for my golden sister's dream house. Justice, karma, and Uncle Jake's ruthless plan restored everything. I never thought I'd be on Reddit posting stuff like this. But here I am. I recently found out my parents embezzled my $120,000 MBA money to help my sister Ashley, 35F, and her fiancé Nathan, 37M, to buy a house. I'm still trying to comprehend the extent of their betrayal, and the whole scenario feels unreal. Allow me to walk you through the first part of this nightmare. Dad's parents, my grandparents, were extremely wealthy and always placed a high value on education. They were traditional in the best sense of the word. They valued hard work. They saved money and invested for the long term. I didn't get to visit them very often because they lived in another state. But whenever we spoke or met, they expressed their concern for my future. Education is the one thing that no one can ever take away from you, my grandmother used to say. And now I see how ironic that is. My grandfather died 3 years ago after a short illness. Even though it was terrible, Grandma was still with us. She was the pillar of the family, recognizing every birthday and achievement, and sent out thoughtful cards and care packages. We lost her last year too. On the day she died, I sat in my flat going through every letter she had ever sent me. I did not know at the time that she and Grandpa had been building something much bigger for my future. But each one contained a few life lessons, and usually a modest check for your education fund. The distribution seemed fair at first when her will was read. My parents' savings and home were inherited. Ashley received family and all of my grandmother's jewelry, which was valued at tens of thousands of dollars. I was left with a substantial education fund, specifically for my MBA courses. This money was to be used only for my education. According to the will, my parents were charged with overseeing it until I needed it, because I was already employed. I was grateful at the time that my grandparents had taken my future so seriously. I never imagined that my parents would tamper with the fund. But in retrospect, I should have seen the warning signs. Ashley has always been the golden child of our family, even from my earliest memories. It's hard to say this without sounding resentful, but she was the person my parents loved the most. She was great at everything she did. She was incredibly talented, hardworking, and unique. I still remember when I graduated from high school. I recently won a major science competition, got a full scholarship to college, and was valedictorian. My parents were on their phones and were barely paying attention. I looked out at the audience during my speech. They were thrilled when Ashley, who had dropped out of college twice before, revealed later that she was considering a career in teaching. "You are just amazing with children," they exclaimed. I received a letter of commendation for my work. That day continued. This trend continued throughout my life. I got a job in a well-known company after working hard and graduating with honors. In the last 6 years, I climbed the corporate ladder, gained the respect and admiration of my superiors and colleagues. As a senior project manager, I supervise a group of 15 people and manage accounts worth millions of dollars. However, I was always the sensible one to my parents, the one who got away with it because I was naturally smart. Ashley, on the other hand, was smart, changed jobs before becoming a teacher. Nathan is the head keeper at our local zoo, and she is currently the kindergarten administrator at a tiny private school. I have no personal problems with them, and they're decent people, although they seem content and competent in their professions. Their combined income is meager at best. They have been discussing the need of buying a house for the past year. Every family meal became a debate about the cost of property and how they were throwing money away. When it came to renting, they would bemoan the unfairness of the market, while admiring homes that were far beyond their means. Although Ashley and Nathan are in their mid-30s, they are still seen as young people in need of support. And my parents would not and say things like, You deserve a nice house. And it's so hard for young people these days. I started working on my MBA program about a month ago. I had been preparing for this move for years. So it wasn't a sudden decision. I've done a lot of research on the programs, strategically developed my career, and maintained an impeccable work record. I want to enroll in a prestigious program that will enable me to move into a leadership role with my current employer. At any level, executive has an MBA from a prestigious university, and I'm determined to do the same. I mentioned the education to my parents one evening, because the application costs alone for a prestigious MBA programs can run into thousands of dollars. I needed to know exactly how much was available. My first real red flag should have been her response. "Don't worry about it," muttered my father, shifting uneasily in his chair. My mother added hastily, "Just concentrate on your applications for now. We'll talk when the time comes." She then abruptly changed the subject to Ashley and Nathan's house hunting. I tried to brush it off at first. I thought maybe they were just being clumsy with the papers. But something didn't feel right. I brought it up again more bluntly. A week later, I made it clear that I needed to know if the funds were available, because I needed to budget for applying to several prestigious schools. They dropped the bomb. At that point, we used the MBA money for Ashley. My mother replied in the most casual way possible. "She and Nathan are buying a house." Thinking I must have misheard, I looked at her. My father added that Ashley needed it now, and that it wouldn't be fair for me to get a free ride. Free ride when Ashley had worked so with student loans. When I asked her to repeat herself, I lost my mind. I'm not proud of my reaction, but it was the release of years of suppressed anger. I insisted on knowing how they could hurt me, and how they could embezzle the money my grandparents had set aside expressly for my education. The will was clear about how the money was to be used. So I pointed out that it was forbidden. My mother just shrugged her shoulders, as if I was exaggerating. She said, "You'll find out." I didn't. As if you couldn't borrow money like everyone else. They acted as if they had done nothing wrong. And that neither my future nor my grandparents' wishes mattered. Then I talked about taking legal action. Even though I'm not a lawyer, it's obvious that what they did was illegal. And what did they do, do you know? They laughed. They laughed out loud. Not just chuckling. "With what money?" my father asked, even staring me in the eyes. "A lawyer is out of your price range," my mother added. "Don't be silly. This is a family business." The humiliation I felt at that moment is indescribable. I stood there stunned. The realization that they had always seen me as an afterthought. Someone whose future they could sacrifice to help Ashley. They didn't care about my financial freedom, my prosperous career, or my academic achievements. I would always be the outsider. I could not sleep that night. I couldn't stop thinking about my grandparents. Trusted my parents to act morally. They were unaware of the true nature of my home life, because it didn't seem worth it. I never told anyone about the way I was treated. I mean, I wasn't being abused. I was. They just didn't care as much about me as they did about Ashley. They weren't violent about Ashley. I arrived at work early the next morning and asked to speak to my employer, Mr. Thompson, in private. Ever since I started working for the company, he has been a mentor to me. So he's not just any boss. He has always encouraged me to pursue my career goals, and has seen me from a junior role to team leader. More importantly, he has experience in corporate law and maintains relationships with leading law firms. I also wanted to get in touch with my dad's cousin, Uncle Jake. He is a wealthy businessman who always seemed to see through my parents' prejudices. Although he wasn't around much when I was growing up, he always showed genuine interest in my achievements and future aspirations. Furthermore, he is the only person in my family who has more influence and achievement than my parents. Something inside me exploded when my parents made fun of me. Even though I never wanted things to get ugly, Because I've always been the quiet one. The sensible one who never made a fuss. They assumed I had no influence. However, they will discover that the son they have always underestimated is much more powerful than they first thought. Since my last post 2 weeks ago, much has happened. Things have moved faster than I expected. After my visit with Mr. Thompson, as well as giving me his full support, he put me in touch with a mate at Wilson and Partners, one of the best law firms in the city. He reminded me, this is about holding your parents accountable and respecting your grandparents' wishes. Not just about money. It was enlightening to meet the lawyers. They attested to the fact that my parents had clearly violated the terms of the will and their fiduciary duties. Finding out that my parents could be charged with a criminal offense with a crime for their actions, shocked me the most. And the lawyers found something disturbing. Long before they told me, my parents had started to move the money into Ashley's account. Months before. Uncle Jake's intervention, however, was the real game changer. Within hours of me contacting him on LinkedIn, he called me. He responded in a way that exceeded my expectations. I always knew your parents played favorites, he replied. But stealing from your own daughter? That crosses every line. Don't worry about the legal fees. I'll take care of everything. Uncle Jake was more than just a talker. He did something right away. He assembled a group of lawyers with state law expertise and hired a forensic accountant to track down every penny of the pilfered money. They gathered. In a matter of days, they had enough evidence to prove that my parents had spent months draining the college fund in a methodical way. The first argument took place on Friday. I was called in by my parents' solicitor in an attempt to reach a family settlement. In exchange for me dropping any legal action, they promised to pay for part of the MBA. Uncle Jake reacted harshly, saying, "You will either be charged with a felony or return the entire amount, plus interest as a penalty. There will be no negotiation." My parents' response was invaluable. They started sending me emails nonstop. "How could you involve outsiders in family matters? We wanted to help you at some point. You're destroying this family." Without answering, I sent everything to Uncle Jake's legal team. He then revealed the second part of his strategy. In addition to going after the money, he is advocating a thorough of my parents' financial transactions, implying that there may be other irregularities of which we are now unaware. Yesterday, Ashley finally spoke out. She claimed in a lengthy email to me that she was about the source of the house money. Mom and Dad said they had savings for us. She wrote in her letter, "I never thought they would steal your money." She concluded by asking me to use common sense and come up with a family solution. I showed her email to Uncle Jake. His response was simple. Send it to the lawyers. It is proof that she knew about the money after it had already happened. But she made no attempt to return it. So she is complicit. This morning was the most fulfilling time. In a hurry, my parents' lawyer called Uncle Jake, the forensic accountant. Apparently, he found that my parents had used their power of attorney to transfer money, even before my grandmother died. This can significantly increase the costs. At the moment, my parents are making a valiant effort to turn things around. Mom begged me to contact them in a heartfelt voicemail, saying that they would find a way to pay back the money. Although Dad admitted in an email that they may have made a mistake, he claimed that they were only trying to help the family. Uncle Jake gave straightforward advice. Avoid answering anything. Let them panic. When you were weak, they made fun of you. Now it's their turn to feel helpless. All of this was made possible by Mr. Thompson's tremendous help. Not only did he write an excellent letter of recommendation, he has already approved my leave of absence for when I start my MBA school, he informed me today. You're showing remarkable composure. Not many people could handle this situation with such professionalism. Unless my parents return all the money, plus fines. The legal team is preparing charges the following week. Uncle Jake predicts that in order to pay for everything, they will have to sell some assets. But in his own words, That's their problem, not yours. Until this is sorted out, I will be staying with a friend. Building security has been told. Not to let my parents into my flat. When they tried to come. To record any attempts by my parents to contact me. Uncle Jake also hired a private investigator. If necessary. This material could be used to prove harassment. 3 weeks have passed since my last update. And things have deteriorated considerably. I am finally able to outline the details of our legal strategies. The forensic investigation has revealed much more than we had anticipated. During our first court appearance, the first bombshell has been revealed. Uncle Jake's team found that my parents had abused their power of attorney over my grandmother's funds in her final months. In addition to stealing my MBA fund long before my grandmother died. The evidence showed that they had methodically moving funds in order to transfer them to Ashley. During the first hearing, their lawyer's statement was invaluable. It is obvious that he was unaware of the seriousness of her financial misdeeds. He actually asked for a delay in speaking to my parents. After our legal team showed them the recorded chronology of the transactions, I later found out that he had confronted my parents for not telling him certain facts, and is now thinking of leaving their case. My grandmother's former carer made the most startling admission. When she saw our legal notice in the estate papers, she contacted Uncle Jake. It turns out that my grandmother had made it very that the money was only for my education. By discussing the MBA fund with my parents several times in her final months. These exchanges were also recorded in the care notes. She had documented every family conversation in a care diary. Ashley's participation also changed in a fascinating way. She hired her own lawyer after realizing the legal implications of accepting stolen money, because she was expected to support the family. This caused a serious rift between her and our parents. My parents panicked when her lawyer suggested that she should distance herself from the matter. The state of the house became disorganized. The takeover is being investigated by the courts, as the deposit was made with stolen money. The problem has been reported to Ashley and Nathan's mortgage lender, who are currently reviewing the loan application. A fraud investigation may be launched. If my parents falsified any of the financial records they unexpectedly co-signed. Uncle Jake's crew also discovered that my parents had informed members of my extended family that I had agreed to give Ashley my MBA fund. They seemed to be preparing their defense in case the transfer was questioned, because they had been fabricating this story for months. Now a number of family members have come forward with emails and messages from my parents supporting this untrue story. The affidavit was the most satisfying development. My father tried hard to maintain his haughty demeanor until Uncle Jake's lawyer produced evidence of their calculated plan. It was quite painful to watch him struggle to describe what they had done. My mother really lost it when she admitted that they had no intention of paying back the money. They had stolen it. They were almost comical in their attempts to control the damage. Despite having numerous recorded conversations with my grandmother and their lawyers, they are now trying to claim that they were perplexed by the wording of the will. 2 of her solicitors have already resigned. So this is her 3rd solicitor. And they are desperately trying to come to an agreement. The final terms were outlined by our legal team, who made it clear that there was no opportunity for discussion. Every penny they took would have to be paid back with interest. This would start on the day they took the money. They would also be responsible for paying all of our legal fees, including the forensic investigation, which had become quite expensive. We also insisted that they stop gaslighting and attempting to rewrite the facts, and provide a formal written admission of wrongdoing. Last but not least, that they sign a legally enforceable contract, agreeing to stop communicating with me in any way. No more using family members as messengers, misleading messages or unexpected visits. My parents' socioeconomic status is deteriorating. Some of their friends have quietly told me how shocked they are And word has spread through their neighborhood. My father's golf club is reconsidering his membership. And my mother's bridge club has asked her to resign as treasurer. Treasure. People don't feel comfortable hanging out with someone who would steal from their own child. It turns out, Ashley's situation is also getting worse. Worried about having a principal involved in financial malpractice. The board of governors at her has called a meeting to review her position. Because Nathan co-signed documents that may contain misleading information. Her workplace is undergoing an ethics review. The latest development is quite gratifying. Remember how my parents sniggered when I mentioned the idea of filing a lawsuit to stop more financial fraud? Uncle Jake's team recently filed a motion to freeze their assets. Their lawyer contacted us and asked for a settlement conference. Uncle Jake continues to be brutal in his methods. In response to my parents' attempts to persuade him to be loyal to the family, he sent a vitriolic email copied to the entire extended family. Family loyalty. You lost all right to talk about loyalty. Loyalty when you stole from your daughter and laughed in her face. Prepare to face the consequences of your actions. My parents are getting really upset because I haven't spoken to them at all. They have resorted to using friends and family to make contact on their behalf. But every effort only strengthens our claim of harassment. Every day their desperation becomes more apparent. And now I can finally reveal the resolution of the story. The outcome of the last is more heartbreaking for my parents than any of us could have imagined. Allow me to explain how justice was finally achieved. Let me start with my favorite moment. That was the last hearing, when my parents realized they had no choice. Finally, their facade broke. In her closing remarks, the judge was very harsh, describing their behavior as a calculated betrayal of both their daughters and their own parents' last wishes. She said in particular that you have shown an appalling degree of moral decay. In their laughter at my first legal threat. In the end, the forensic analysis showed that my parents had been preparing this robbery for more than a year. Before my grandmother's death, they had methodically drawn up fictitious family contracts and documented fictitious discussions about my voluntary surrender of the MBA fund. According to the court, their actions were far worse. Because of their willfulness, the fines were severe. In addition to returning my MBA money, plus interest, they were ordered to pay punitive damages, which almost doubled the original amount. The judge justified the heavy by pointing to their deliberate malice and repeated attempts to mislead the court. The fascinating part is that my parents had to sell their house. Yes, they did. The house they inherited from my grandparents. In order to pay these fees. No one missed the irony. They had downgraded significantly from their previous way of life to renting a modest suburb of the city. Their decline in society was dramatic. Membership of the country club has been withdrawn. Where do they sit on various community boards? Lost. The social network that my mother built up over several decades has fallen apart. It turns out that the upper middle class suburban society does not tolerate stealing from children and lying about it. The professional repercussions were just as bad. My father, who took great satisfaction in his business, was forced into early retirement. When someone has been legally proved to have taken child's inheritance, nobody wants to do business with them. In local businesses, his former colleagues now avoid him. After running local charities, my mother was forced to resign from her volunteer positions. The last straw was when she was asked to resign from all her positions in her church, of which they had been active members for 20 years. They've become social pariahs in their own community. Uncle Jake said. Ashley and Nathan's relationship is probably the most remarkable development. Their ideal home. They went crazy when the mortgage company found out that had been made with stolen money. They withdrew their approval of the loan. They are currently dealing with their own legal problems as a result of their knowingly accepting stolen funds. Ashley's career has completely collapsed. In their formal statement, The school board cited ethical concerns and loss of community trust as reasons for their unanimous decision to dismiss her as a principal. Since the news went viral in the local school community, she is now having difficulty finding even an entry-level teaching job. Nathan's situation wasn't any better. He was placed on administrative leave from the zoo, while his involvement in the financial misconduct was being investigated. Although he wasn't personally responsible for the theft, his signature on loan documents, which contained false information, raised ethical questions. The strain on their relationship. Nathan left her apartment last week. He accused her of being like her parents, while Ashley blamed him for not being more supportive during the situation. They are in the process of ending their engagement. Uncle Jake's plan for total social and legal ruin was more successful than anyone could have predicted. He called a family meeting when my parents tried to make another plea for family loyalty. Not to patch things up, but to explain what they had done in front of the whole extended family. He gave a timeline of their deception in this discussion, detailing the false documents they had produced and the lies they told various family members. The general reaction was disgust of a number of family members who had tried to resolve the conflict were now publicly denouncing my parents. The meeting essentially put an end to any remaining family support they might have had. And the most telling moment was when my mother's sister, who had always been one of her closest supporters, stood up and said, "I don't even recognize who you are anymore. In my case, I've come out stronger than before, along with significant damages. My MBA fund was fully refunded. In addition to getting my money back, I was accepted into a prestigious MBA program on a merit scholarship." In his letter of recommendation, Mr. Thompson praised my exceptional and integrity in dealing with this problem. My employer was very helpful. They gave me permission to take a leave of absence from the MBA program and have even promised me a management position after I graduated. Your handling of this situation demonstrated that you have the strength and judgment necessary for leadership, Mr. Thompson told me. Uncle Jake is now considered a true mentor. After I finish my MBA, he is already discussing possible investment opportunities with me, and introduced me to his business network. He told me, "Your grandparents would be proud of you, because you've shown you have the backbone for business." I've moved into an upmarket apartment in a gated complex that keeps my parents at bay. The doorman is instructed not to let them in, and has their photographs. Their phone lines and emails have been blocked, and all efforts at communication now go directly to our legal department. The final twist. Nathan used to work at the zoo, which is next door to my parents' new apartment. They have to visit the place that symbolizes the beginning of their demise every day. According to Uncle Jake, karma can sometimes be humorous. Someone in their social circle wrote to me an anonymous letter yesterday. It seems that my mother stays at home most of the time, only going out for essentials. It has been reported that my father spends hours sitting alone in a nearby cafe, staring into space. The social calendar they used to have is now completely empty. I find myself thinking about my grandmother's statement. Education is the one thing that no one can ever take away from you. As I prepare to start my MBA school, she was right. With her foresight and Uncle Jake's help, not only have I secured my education fund, but also taught my parents a lifelong lesson. That concludes this story. I appreciate everyone's support along the way. I'm at peace knowing that justice has been done, even though I never wanted it to end this way. Thank you for watching.